I'm Phil Cornish, and I'm your host of Cornish Talks Common Sense. We've been talking so far about some underlying principles that help you to understand why are all these events happening in our society today. Why are wars happening? The idea of concern among politicians and others, scientists, about climate change. Social transformations that are happening with the idea of critical race theory and transgenderism and social media. These are all issues that are unfolding before us every day in newspapers, on the news that you watch at supper time. These events that are happening are understandable if we take the time to look at what is behind it. What are the underlying currents that are shaping our world views today? So I've talked to you about three of those core items that are governing how we think as a society today. The first of those is the idea of the advent of postmodernism, the idea that there is no longer any objective truth. There is no moral plumb line that tells us how we measure what is right and what is wrong, what is truth, what is falsehood. The idea of postmodernism is that everybody has their own truth. It's all subjective. How we interpret language, how we interpret communication is based just on how you think of it. It's what your own truth is. And that's a radical change from historically what we've thought of as there being an objective truth. The second idea is the idea that we've elevated feelings to a level that is just eroding the idea that reasoned, common sense decision making is what should govern human conduct. Instead, we're saying, well, our feelings are most important. There's a writer from hundreds of years ago, Alexander Pope, who wrote an essay called An Essay on Man, where he talked about humankind is a ball of confusion of thinking and passion fighting each other. And so as humans, we understand that we have both feelings and we have critical thinking skills. But today, through the field of psychiatry and the idea of self-esteem, we've elevated the idea that we should consider feelings to be the most important thing. And so if we say something that causes somebody else offense, that should be shut down and censored. And so reasoned debate and critical thinking can be shut down simply because someone's feelings may be hurt. And that can be a dangerous thing. The third thing we talked about is the idea that eschatology doesn't matter anymore. This idea that God is relevant to human affairs is now gone. This idea propagated probably most forcefully by Friedrich Nietzsche in recent history is that God is dead. God just isn't relevant anymore. And morals are only what makes us stronger. The idea that there is an objective right and wrong, that there's really even good and evil, no longer matters. It's just whatever makes us stronger as humans. We're on our own in the world. We got to fix ourselves and fix our world because we're all there is. These are the core underlying values that have supplanted the idea that there is objective truth, that there is a God that is relevant to humans, and the idea that Western civilization, as we know it, has been built around these principles of Judeo-Christian thinking are now being steadily eroded and abandoned. So I want to look at some issues in particular that explain why that has happened. And the first one I'm going to talk to you about, and that is a new budget that's been passed by our federal government in Canada. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about our debt situation. And the idea here is that debt can be a dangerous thing. I have with me today a couple of books that I relied on when I was writing a book of my own almost 25 years ago now, called Now Through a Glass Darkly, Recounting the Human Captivity. And I talked about issues that are all happening today, 25 years later. Ideas of increase in crime, increase in debt, increase in immorality happening in our society, wars, disease, things that are unfolding today that I saw coming 25 years ago. And one of those ideas was talking about the idea of debt. And I relied on a couple of authors that talked about how society was going to have an economic meltdown. And their thinking was it was going to happen in the early 1990s. And one of those is an author, Ravi Batra, who talked about the Great Depression of 1990. And another is an author who talked about living beyond our means, of accumulating debt that is more than we can bear. And I want to talk to you about why that has become a dangerous idea. Our debt is something that will never be paid back. Now, if I was an economist and I was telling this on the news to the general public, it would cause panic. It would cause a meltdown if it was recognized that our debt crisis was something that was going to never be fixed. But I want to tell you that's exactly what is going to happen. So let me tell you a little bit about why. Well, this last week, our federal government passed a new budget, and it did so again, creating a deficit. And we now have accumulated an overall debt in Canada of over $1.1 trillion. And over $350 billion of that has been created just in the last couple of years. And so our debt has been elevated to unknown levels. I want to give you some statistical information of what this means for you. Do you understand that our debt, the interest in our debt that we have to pay is accumulating at $6 million an hour. Every hour we generate $6 million of interest that has to be paid back on our total national debt of $1.1 trillion. $6 million an hour. Every one of us as Canadians, if we were to divide up the national debt, would owe over $30,000. Every one of us, if we were to apportion on a per person basis this debt of $1.1 trillion. We need to understand that this is not sustainable. This is something that we will not be able to pay off. Our governments cannot even balance budgets on an annual basis. We're having deficits annually in the billions of dollars, even at a provincial level as well as a federal level. We are unable to even control our annual budgets, let alone pay off our national debt. And this is going to inevitably lead to disaster. Well, how have we come to this notion, this idea of debt and the idea that debt is a good thing? Well, the idea of credit and borrowing is really actually a fairly new concept. The idea of a credit card, personally, is something that didn't happen until about the 1950s. So the idea of being able to borrow is really a relatively new thing for civilization. And so we've done what humans do, and that's that we've tended to use it to excess. We've created debt that has become rampant and that we will never be able to pay down. So what does this mean for us as a society? What does this mean for our functioning? Well, if we can no longer pay down our debt, something is going to give, right? We cannot carry on the way we are because it's been an artificially engineered economy. What I mean by that is our interest rates now for a decade have been at virtually 0%. level of interest rate. Who wouldn't borrow? Who wouldn't want to borrow when you can borrow at interests that are virtually nothing? Everyone will want to do that. And so that has caused us to become excessive in our debt as it's built up and built up with this false illusion that it's really not costing us anything. And so we've artificially constrained interest rates, and this has caused our debt accumulation by this falsely engineered economy that's been created by our economists at the Bank of Canada or the Federal Reserve in the United States. These artificially low levels will cause us to pay a price. And it's my word to you today that this is something that will not be fixable. So we need to end the madness of debt. And our governments are not getting it under control. And even as our Minister of Finance said this week that we are controlling our debt, we need to look through that facade and understand that our debt is at dangerous, unprecedented levels that will lead us inevitably to a situation of dire economic disaster. Let's take a break and stop there, and we'll come back with another topic in just a minute.